Hey, I'm Morgan Gales with Cycle World Magazine, and we are out here with the all-new 2022 Indian Chief. We've had this bike for a few weeks, and we've ridden a few hundred miles on highways, mountain roads, just trying to find out what it does well, find the limits of the bike, and find any challenges that it may have. So let's get into what's new, what we love about this bike, and any criticisms that we found. What we're testing here is the Chief Dark Horse. This is the Dark Horse variant on the base model Chief. We also have the base model Bobber and the base model Super Chief. Each comes with the 111 Thunderstroke engine. Then there are Dark Horse and Limited variants, which get trim upgrades as well as the larger 116. For the Dark Horse here, we see blacked out trim, the 116, as well as this Ride Command gauge in between the handlebars, which you don't see on the base model, the $14,500 Chief. This bike will cost you $17,000, and then the top of the line Super Chief Limited goes up to $21,000. So starting off with the engine, right in the middle of the bike you see that Thunderstroke 116. With my long-termer last year, I had a Springfield Dark Horse, which has the same engine. I put about 15,000 miles on this, and I've come to really love it. Strong, sturdy power plant. It cruises highway miles easily. It has great low-end torque, good feel, good, sort of combustion feel to the engine, but the vibration never gets exhaustive or tiring. The engine here, it's proven. There have been a little bit of variation in the hard parts to this model. You see there are new mounts in the front of the engine to the frame to create a little bit more torsional rigidity. And then you also slim down the primary case on the left side here to create a little bit more room near the rider's left foot. Other than that, you have some software changes. You see Rain, Sport, and Standard modes have all been adapted to fit the new intake and exhaust here, as well as meet Euro 5 emission standards. Rain mode has its obvious application. Standard mode is the most linear power delivery, which I found to really favor in my riding. Sport mode is more of an exhibition in the baggers, but that's sort of because of the weight and those hard tires. Here, when you shave off the weight and you have those grippier Sport Dragon tires, Sport mode actually, it hooks up, and so you aren't spinning the tire as much. You really do feel it. So it is fun, but it's also a bit jerky. You get a lot more input on that initial throttle twist. So for consistent riding, I basically just put it in standard mode and stayed there. Ride-by-wire on Chief models leads to a pretty vague throttle feel, and you have a really vague clutch feel as well, which makes low-speed handling and precise launches sort of a challenge. Like all air-cooled models, this bike doesn't have traction control. So it took me a little bit of getting used to find that grab point on the clutch and get used to the throttle to be able to really launch quickly. The suspension on this bike is another area that I was really impressed, which isn't something that you often get to say with a 3-inch travel rear shock. So it's manufactured by ZF Suspension, front and rear. You're looking at a 46mm fork with 5.2 inches of travel, and again, 3 inches of travel in the rear. This fork was plush. It stayed smooth throughout our testing. Even on chopped up canyon roads, it maintained its composure. It was soft when I wanted it to be soft. It was firm when I wanted it to be firm. There wasn't excessive brake dive. I was stoked on the forks. And then the shock, same thing. Everything but the most abrupt impact was eaten up by that shock. It maintained composure. It felt really planted when whipping through the turns. Both the Bobber and the Super Chief come with spoked 16-inch wheels, whereas the Chief and Chief Dark Horse come with a 16-inch, 19-inch mags. Previous Chief models came with Michelin Touratechs, whereas now we see Pirelli Night Dragons. The old tires were great for long miles, they were great on the highway, great on the straights, a really hard compound, but for this bike, it's a little bit more performance oriented, so it's really nice to see these Pirelli Night Dragons. They are more grippy. You're obviously making a trade for performance, for mileage, but with this bike, you want all that performance that you can get. And at multiple points in our testing, I was really thankful, and I kept thinking about how good these tires were performing. For real canyon carving, I wanted to test this bike to see how hard it can go, and honestly, I sort of scared myself in the process. I took it up to some really twisty roads, and I tried to scrape the feelers off of those pegs. I spent a few hours, I got low, I found the points, but honestly, it was much harder to get this bike out of its comfort zone than I thought it would be. The suspension stayed composed, the brakes were great and easy to apply precisely, just the right amount. There's good feedback from the bike throughout, except for, of course, the clutch and throttle. But I pushed it and I found the points pushing it through those canyons, and honestly, it was way further than I thought and way further than most of the potential owners are likely to take this bike, but it is fun and it can do it. This bike is made to ride hard and it is incredibly fun to ride hard. Then when you get out on the highway, this engine's open road origins really show themselves. You know, this thing cruises along at 3,000 RPM at 80 miles an hour like it's nothing. You know, you chug along, but it still has that torque-rich V-twin feel for you to crank and pass. The product director, Brandon Kramer, when we were talking about this bike, said that the Chief base model was designed more for people 6 foot and under. I'm 6'4", so I was a little bit cramped up on this. My knees were a little bit above my hips, and on longer stretches of highway, I did feel a little discomfort in my hip flexors there. The Super Chief model comes with pulled back bars and floorboards. The bobber has mini apes and forwards. I imagine one of those would better fit my height. And of course, any cruiser accessory catalog is gonna have tons of ergonomic options. One thing I don't get to say super often, a lot of the time with cruisers, the seat is just designed to make the low silhouette. We have a 26-inch seat height here, but this seat is dumb comfy. This seat has no right to be as comfortable as it is. It's small for the class, it's narrow, it's just a solo seat, but I spent hours on it and it is remarkably comfortable. One of the coolest parts about this bike, one thing that's really new that we see here, is the 4-inch ride command system. With many of Indian's other bikes, if you have the bike off, ride command looks like an iPad mini in the middle of your dash. But what we have here, when it's off, it looks like a simple round gauge, but you get all the benefits of navigation, you get Bluetooth phone communication, you get bike readout, you can change the modes, navigate the menus, you have a little joystick here. It is just a great luxury top shelf feature thrown into this bike that if you don't know what it's doing, if it's off, it just looks like a clean classic gauge. There are some criticisms, of course. With any new bike, you have to walk this line of modern luxury and simplicity like they're trying to achieve here. So you have this big ride command with navigation, with Bluetooth communication, and then what comes along with that is this big wiring harness that blocks the window view that you have here that's so nice. You have, you know, this big room around the engine for it to move, for you to really feel that V-twin, but you also have these big old plastic panels right behind it. So there's slight compromises in an otherwise pretty tight package, but they do exist here. So obviously looking at an American V-twin heavyweight cruiser with 2 exposed shocks in the rear, you've got to ask yourself, are they aiming at the Dyna customer, the FXR customer? And the answer is yes, totally, obviously. That avenue of customization in American V-twin, and especially as racing and bagger racing are trending so hard in this space, you've got to ask yourself, is this bike a good candidate for that sort of customization? And I'd say, yes, it is. While the rear shock functions beautifully, it's right out there. You can see what you can do with it. You can add some space in the rear. You can change up performance. You've got exposed risers. You've got exposed mounts on the frame here. You can change up ergonomics easily. When it comes to real high performance, I wish I would have seen a little bit steeper rake than the 29° there. I think that would have given the bike a lot of potential as far as high performance, track usage, and stuff like that. But as far as riding it like a cruiser, it's more than adequate and the bike performs very well. So I've really enjoyed the past few weeks that I've had with this bike. I've obviously enjoyed highway miles a little bit less than I've enjoyed the canyon stuff, as the ergonomic package is just a little bit more suited for tight, twisty riding for me. The styling on the bike is incredible. I think it's really hard to redesign an American big twin. You have to go for the tradition and the simplicity that we're used to and that we want, but also we expect, you know, luxury components and we expect comfort. So I think the designers here have walked that line really well, delivering a bike that still looks classically Indian, it still shows the tradition and it still fits that classic cruiser silhouette, but it pushes the boundaries of how you ride that bike a little bit more and a little bit more of what you can do with it. All right, that's it for our first ride review of the 2022 Indian Chief Dark Horse. If you like what we're doing, like, comment, subscribe, and follow along for our next video. Look forward to seeing you there.